All right, so let's watch the video, okay? And after we watch the video, we can open a discussion and also give our own examples and explanations about the structure of English basic sentences. So enjoy the video. If you wish, you could activate subtitles. I think you know about that. But if you could watch it without subtitles, it's a better idea.
If you're listening to this lecture, you probably know how to speak English pretty well already. I'm using many complicated sentences, and they're difficult to understand if you're just beginning English. So you might say, well, why do we need to go back to the basics, even if it's just for a moment? Well, if we learn how the different parts of sentences work together, we can think more clearly about trickier sentences which aren't so clear. All right, so let's take probably one of the easiest sentences I can come up with. John teaches. All right? Now, if I ask people, well, identify the parts of it. If I ask people to identify the parts of this, they might say, well, this is a noun and this is a verb. And they'd be right. But that's just identifying what type of word this is, right? It's like saying that's a maple tree and that's a rose, right? It doesn't tell me how these words work together, right? What function they play in this sentence. By the way, this most simple type of sentence is often called a clausal sentence because it's basically the same thing as a clause. Now, you might not know what a clause is yet. I will treat it in within a few lectures from now, but for now, just know that it's the most basic type of sentence that you can pretty much come up with, aside from very short sentences like ouch, which are not what we're talking about. So,
Okay, so up to here, he is just telling something that we already know. Okay, what is a clausal sentence? The most basic type of clause. It's a sentence and it's at the same time a clause. It's canonical. Okay, it's the basic order. And then he says that if you know the very basic, why go back to the basics? Because if you know the basic ones, you will be probably able to turn more complex units into basic units and analyze them. Okay, so from now on, I'll play the video to the end. Oh, somebody recognized the Canadian accent. Great. I didn't know that.
He
oh,
said about.
John teaches.
He said what?
Instead of saying about, he said about. That was
Ah,
funny.
about. Oh, have you watched South Park? Do you know South Park, the cartoon? It's
Yeah,
about it's about democracy. It's about respect. It's I didn't know Canadians really said about. And
yeah,
I remember
they,
the ministry, the American minister saying, they start laughing, and then he says, "Can you repeat, please, what your arguments are about?" And then he said, "It's about
jeez.
democracy." It's nice. Okay, so let's see what the
Boo.
video is about.
Very short sentences like ouch, which um, are not what we're talking about. So, John teaches. What is John? What does this noun actually do? Well, it is the subject, right? Nouns can do lots of things in sentences. They can be the objects or they can be the subjects. In this case, this noun is the subject, right? Now, what is this verb doing? Well, this verb is acting as the predicate. And this is our definition of a very simple sentence of a clause is that it's a group of words that consists of a subject and a predicate. Now we need to know what these things actually are, and that's going to be the topic of the next two lectures. Today, right now, in this first one, we'll just talk about what subjects are. Now people often say, well, subjects do the verb, right? The subject does the verb. Well, that's certainly true with John teaching, and even with a little bit more complicated sentences like I ate an apple. It's true here too. Who did the eating? Well, I did it. I did the eating, right? So here the subject is doing the verb. However, let's turn this around and make it passive, right? The apple was eaten.
Canonical clauses are never passive.
Well, now, what can apples really do? Well, apples can grow and apples can rot. Do apples have any choice about this eating business? Well, no, they don't. They don't do anything to do with eating, right? They get eaten. So in this case, the apple is not functioning as the thing that does the verb. Instead, some people will say it's the topic. And well, that seems to be a little bit stronger because it's true for both of these, right? I'm the topic of this sentence. What did I do? Well, I ate an apple. The apple is the topic of this sentence. What happened to the apple? Well, the apple was eaten. Now that's good to some extent, but let's take a look at a few situations where it doesn't quite hold up. Or maybe it partially holds up. Let's take a look at one where it partially holds up. It's nice. It's nice to have you as a friend. Well, already this isn't quite as simple as it could be, but let's just take a look at how this subject works. It's nice. Well, what's nice? It's nice to have you as a friend. But what is it? Well, actually, it looks forward to this verb here, to have, right? Another way of saying this sentence is having you as a friend is nice. All right, so I guess having you as a friend is the topic of this sentence, but still it's kind of confusing to have this pronoun stuck out front. All right, well, you say you can sort of solve that one, but I've got one that's a little bit harder to solve. How about this one? Not it's nice too, but it is nice, or sorry, it is raining. How about that one? Here we go. It is raining. Now you might say, well, surely it refers to something. But what? I can't say the weather is raining. That's not a very good sentence. We don't say weather is raining. And we don't say clouds are raining. It is raining. Well, what is it? I don't know. All right? That's the truth. It is raining. It's one of these funny English sentences. So English has these funny subjects which don't do the verb and they aren't really the topic, right? So I think we started off knowing what a subject was. And you can view it kind of like an onion maybe, right? We looked at this onion and we say, well, I know what an onion is, but just to make sure, let's peel off this outer layer and make sure that it's an onion. So we have a smaller onion. And we keep on peeling our onion until poof, it vanishes at the end. Does this mean there was nothing to a subject and there's no such thing as a subject? Certainly not, but we have to define it grammatically in English. And what I mean by that is I need to look at how it works in a sentence. Well, there's a couple clues that a certain word or a certain phrase is.
Okay, do you understand his purpose? He presents an explanation for the subject and then he refuses it, showing that it's valid in some contexts, but in some other contexts, it cannot be applied. So he gives the example of the onion. He's peeling the onion. Yeah. And the purpose of this is looking for a more precise, a more accurate grammatical definition, right?
The subject, okay? One of these clues is that it usually comes before the verb. Usually before the verb.
He'll define the subject in terms of position.
That should be an H. Usually before the verb. So I could use a sentence like, he is nice, right? He is nice. Is the verb, and he is the subject. The subject does indeed come before the verb. He is nice. Is there anything else? Well, yeah, the verb and the subject and the verb usually have to agree. Not usually, they do have to agree. There's an agreement between them, right? What do I mean by agreement? Well, I mean, if we change the number of people involved here, change it to they, need a bigger T there, they, my goodness, all right, they, nice, we need to change this verb, right? It's not they is nice, it's they are nice, right? So subjects, when you change their number, cause the verb to change as well sometimes, all right? Sometimes it will end up being the same form of the verb, but the verb needs to agree with this subject, all right? So that's another marker of a subject. Another one is if we look at when we look at questions, particularly closed questions, that's questions with a yes or no answer. Do they invert the order? Do they change the order around? Well, in this case, certainly, yeah. If we look at that first sentence, he is nice. The question form is he nice? The question of this is, are they nice? So these are the patterns that subjects fall into. And this is a more reliable way to determine what the subject is than to simply say that the subject does the verb or is the topic of the verb. However, I must admit, these two guidelines are often true. The subject is often the thing indeed that does do the verb or is the topic of the sentence. But it's important to realize that that's not really how we define it. It's the thing that comes before the verb, basically. All right, in the next lecture, we'll look at the predicate and how it works.
What do you understand about the subject from this lecture? He presents us 3 ways to define the subject. He tries to give, definitions, and his last attempt is to define the subject in terms of what?
In terms of performer of the action or receiving end of an action?
Yes, I'd say that he tries to define the subject first as the thing that does the verb, as he said. It's an attempt to define the subject with a sentence. Then he tries to define it as the topic of the sentence. And at the end, he will do, he will try to define the subject using syntax. And if we go back to the definition of syntax, we will remember that syntax means, what is the meaning of the word syntax in Greek? Syntax is all about
order.
Order. And he will try to define the subject considering the order. So what are the conclusions that he takes about the subject? First of all, the subject, in terms of order, comes. What are the basic elements of a canonical clause? Subject, verb.
Before the verb.
Before the verb. The second conclusion?
It has to agree with the verb.
Agreement. And the third conclusion, he will use a non-canonical structure, which is the interrogative, to check, does it invert with the verb? If it does, it is the subject. So if we had to write a syntactical definition of the subject, it's the entity in a clause that comes before the verb. It has to agree, and it is inverted in questions. Basically, this is the subject, okay? It's a better definition, better in terms that it will work in all situations and not only in some of them. Then saying that the subject is the one that does the verb, because I am tired. In fact, I'm not doing anything. It's a state of being. Yeah. But I am tired. The question is, am I tired? So there is an inversion. And then if we change the subject for he is tired. So we have a proof that there is an agreement. Basically, this first lecture is about how to define the subject, not in terms of declaring something about the subject, but concluding something about the subject, considering its position in a clause. Okay, now I'll play the second lecture, okay, about the predicate, because we need these concepts of subject and predicate to go on in our own explanation, right? So I'll play it here.
Ushua, could you wait a little bit? I need to change the I'm gonna be on my computer, So could you wait a little bit and then I'll
Okay.
tell you when you can play.
If I could wait before I
Yeah.
play. Yeah. Okay.
Just a
Okay.
bit.
When you're
Gonna
ready,
be,
tell me, please.
yeah, it's gonna be really, really fast. Just a minute.
Okay. Is the volume okay? The volume of the lecture?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Yeah, I prefer to use two computers, so I have another account in the classroom. It's better than sharing screens. As I said, I'd love to share with you the reference for this video, but when I looked for the channel was not there anymore. Maybe someone replicated the video, but at a first search, I couldn't find it.
It happens all the time when you're looking for a video, but somehow it gets taken down.
And he is very didactical. I think this guy is kind of amazing. He is good at what he's doing. Let's just wait a little for Felipe.
No problem.
Do you have any question up to now concerning this video, this first one?
Not really.
It's very important that you follow his argument, okay? He is working with very basic types of sentences, with clausal sentences, and also the canonical ones. Although at some moment he mentions non-canonical structures like the apple was eaten, just to show us how this definition of the subject doing the verb does not work all the time. In non-canonical structures, the subject does not do the verb sometimes. And he wants to show us how weak this definition could be in some contexts. How can I say that there's a lack of accuracy. By the way, Raíssa, did you receive my email?
É hoje ou ontem?
I think it was yesterday.
Ih, não
or the
recebi
day
não.
before. Okay.
Deixa eu procurar
Okay.
aqui.
I just sent you an email with the correction for that exercise, remember? It's just sent you a feedback.
Ah, ok, eu vou dar uma procurada aqui.
That's right. It's taking a bit long. Oh, he's back.
Yeah, I'm back.
Ready?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go.
All right, so welcome back. We are looking at basic sentences, actually clausal sentences, right? These most basic sentences. And in the last lecture, we treated the subject and what it actually means. Now, it's not always a noun. In this case, it's a noun, but we talked about the idea that the subject is that part of the sentence that comes before the verb. Now, the predicate is the last part of the sentence. In this case, it's only a verb, but predicates can be made of many words, just like subjects can be made of many words. Let's take a look at how this one works. All right, so this most basic type is just a verb. Now, of course, the word verb just tells me what type of word it is. Teach is a verb. But how is it functioning? Well, it's functioning as the predicate, but more specifically, it's the head of this predicate. It's the main guy in this predicate. In other words, we can also say that this word is the predicator, right? You can think of the Terminator if you like. It's the word that's in charge of the predicate, the predicator. And in this case, the predicator has no one else to take care of. This predicate is just made up of the predicator. But other types of clausal sentences can include other words. So let's take a look at a few of these right now. Okay, so we'll put a list of all the basic types of clausal sentences over here on the right, and we'll go through them one by one. So I sing is just like John teaches, right? We've got a subject over here, and we've got a predicator over here, and the predicator has nothing to take care of, so the predicator just sits there by itself in the predicate, right? This is the predicate. Okay, let's take a look at another sentence then. How about, well, let's do another simple sentence, but one that has a verb which isn't good enough on its own, right? On its own. I am. Well, I am what? Maybe I am a teacher. Okay? Now, if we look at this, we still have a subject, I, and we have a predicator, am, which is in charge of a predicate. But this time there are some other words in this predicate. What do we have in this predicate? Well, we have a noun phrase, right? This has a noun, teacher, and a determiner, a, and together this forms a noun phrase, a group of words that function together. It's several words that function together as a noun, all right?
You see the definition of noun phrase here, a group of words together that function as a noun. In the case of I am a teacher. So first of all, every predicate has a predicator. Okay. In the case of John teaches, the predicator is teaches because it's the only word. He defines as the predicator as the word that is in charge of the predicate. Well, if the predicate is made of only one word, it's obvious. But in the second case here, I am a teacher, the predicator will always be the verb in the predicate, okay? And a teacher is a noun phrase, he says. It's composed of a noun, teacher, and the determiner, a, right? Any questions about this? Do you understand what the predicator is? It's like the head of the predicate. Is it clear for you?
Yes, yes, it is.
Good.
So it's a noun phrase, but that just tells me what type of group this is. It doesn't tell me its function. Okay, so let's just hold on for a second, or maybe I'll leave noun phrase up there for now. Let's look at another type of sentence, okay? We need to have two, so just hang on for a second. I ate an apple. Well, this certainly looks very similar to I am a teacher, right? We've got a subject, I. We've got a predicator, ate, right? This is the verb that's in charge of the rest of the clause, right? Ate an apple. And this is another noun phrase. It's very similar, a determiner and a noun. But I hope you can see that even though these are both noun phrases, they function in a different way, right? So let's see how they function. I am a teacher. A teacher describes me, right? So this noun phrase describes who I am. Does an apple describe who I am? Well, not really. I do things to apples, right? I come across apples and I eat them. I don't do anything to the teacher. I am a teacher. That's who I am. All right? So we have two different ways that these noun phrases behave within the sentence. All right? So, what are these two different ways? What are the labels that we should stick on these two different ways? Well, this is called a predicative complement. A predicative complement. And predicative complements describe something else in the sentence. In this case, they describe me, right? I am a teacher. That's how you describe me. This is an object. And I think you can see that. This is something I came across. It's not me, but I found it and I did the eating to it, right? It suffered the eating. I ate that apple. And so therefore this apple is separate from me. It's an object that I came across. Now I want to point out one thing here. I could also use an adjective up here. All right? Instead of I am a teacher, I could say I am strict. Actually, I'm not strict. I'm not strict enough. That's my problem as a teacher. But let's just pretend for now I'm strict. Okay? Strict is functioning the same way as a teacher does here, right? This is the subject. This is the predicator. And this is the predicative complement, right? But it's not a noun phrase. It's an adjective phrase, right? It's an adjective all by itself. And it describes me. So in other words, these are both predicative complements. Predicative complements, this term predicative complement does not describe just noun phrases. It describes language that comes out back that describes something else in the sentence, whereas an object is a new thing. All right, I think that makes sense somewhat. Let's look at a few more complicated ways.
Did you understand why in I am strict we do not have a noun phrase? Here, I am a teacher, we have a noun phrase, okay, in a teacher. Do you understand why I am strict is different? Strict is still a predicative complement, but it's not a noun phrase. What kind of phrase is it?
Is it an adjective phrase?
In fact, yes. In fact, it's an adjective on its own,
yeah,
that works the same way as adjective phrases, okay? And it is a predicative complement. From this, we can conclude that predicative complements can be noun phrases or adjective phrases or anything that refers back to another element in the sentence to describe it, okay? Now, it's a different case with an apple or with I bought a car, okay, in which an apple, a car, they are objects because they are external to the subject. Strict and a teacher are intrinsic to the subject, whereas an apple, a car, a house, whatever, they are external elements with which the subject establishes a kind of relation mediated by the verb, right? Questions about this? Play it again.
Of forming basic clauses. How about I gave him an apple? Well, this is very similar to this object phrase up here, right? This clause up here. I ate an apple. Well, I is still the subject. Gave is just another predicator. It's a different one, but it's still a predicator in charge of a predicate. And we've got this apple out here, and this is also an object, right? Because an apple was the thing that got eaten here. An apple is the thing that got given here. But we've got this new object out here, him. This is also an object. But the difference is he doesn't actually get given. He's the direction where the giving goes, in a way, okay? The apple gets given, so it's the direct object. The direct object. When I talk about him, he's the direction, so he's the indirect object. All right? Maybe to make things a little bit clearer, I'll write it out here because I don't quite have enough room right now. Indirect object. This is the direction that the action takes place. The direct object is the thing that actually interacts with this verb. So we can say that this is the IO, the indirect object. This is the DO, the direct object. In this
Well, from Portuguese syntax, we are used to consider indirect objects, those which are preceded by prepositions. Do you agree with that? So we know how to distinguish direct objects and indirect objects according to the presence or the absence of a preposition. Now, do you see any preposition in I gave him an apple? Is there an explicit preposition? There is no explicit preposition. But what we have here is the presence of him. And if you go to English grammar, you will see that we have two different kinds of pronouns, objective and subjective pronouns. I is a subjective pronoun because it works as the subject. Him is an objective pronoun. Her, them, they are all objective pronouns because their main function is as an object. They are not preceded by a preposition, but if we work the sentence, if we rephrase the sentence, we can say, for example, I gave an apple to him. Although it's not that usual or as usual as I gave him an apple, but this kind of manipulation can be done to make the preposition explicit. So that's why him is the indirect object, because it's the direction where the action goes. That's his point.
This case is I ate an apple. Is this a direct object or an indirect object? Does the apple get eaten? Well, if so, then it's the direct object. Okay? This is a little bit messy, so I'll try to clear it up. All right, they're a little bit better now. I think that you can see the difference now between a direct object and an indirect object more clearly, because you can see the markings a little bit more easily. That's it. That is a D, believe it or not. D-O. All right, so we've got 4 basic types of clausal sentence, of this most basic variety of sentence. I'll give you one more, and I'd like you to use what I've taught you so far, which is that we have predicative complements, or PCs, we have indirect objects, or IOs, and we have direct objects, or DOs. And I want you to take a look at this sentence and tell me how it works. All right? Here we go. So, I made him happy. Pause and see if you can figure it out. When you come back, you'll find out that, well, this I is the subject, right? And made is still the predicator in charge of the predicate. And now we just have these 2 words that we need to figure out. Well, here, him was the direction where the apple got given. But in this case, him is the thing that gets made, right? I make him different, right? He gets transformed. He gets made into something new. So he's the direct object here, right? I'm doing something to him. I made him. And how did I make him? I made him happy. Now up here we had an adjective, and it described me. I am strict. In this sentence, what does happy describe? Does it describe me, or does it describe him? Well, it describes him. It's the direction he took, right? I made him happy. This is still a predicative complement, but in this case, it's focused on the object. So we would call it maybe an object-oriented predicative complement, whereas this was a subject-oriented predicative complement. Predicative complements, just remember, they describe some other part of the sentence. They aren't a new thing that gets played with like an apple or this person who I'm trying to cheer up. Okay? So this is the basic structure which you need to get. In the next lecture, we're going to take a closer look at how clauses, phrases, and sentences differ, because at this point we need to clear up what these terms actually mean.
Right. So basically, we saw the different sentence patterns, the different clausal patterns in English, okay, how they work, okay, and now we are going to our own explanation, and we are going to try to extend these concepts that we have seen in the video with our own examples. Uh, did you understand the thing of direct object and indirect object? Think of indirect objects always as the direction where the action goes. So I'll present here the slides for you. Just a moment. So we are dealing with clausal sentences. You probably remember. I beg your pardon. I don't know if you hear somebody hamming on the wall. There's some builder working in the neighbor. Sorry about that. So clausal sentences are the most basic kind of sentences. They are made up of only one clause, okay? And this clause can be split into subject and predicate, as we have seen in they study, in which study is the predicate and they is the subject. This is nothing new, okay? Now, study is the verb, which is the head of the predicate. Every time we have a one word predicate, this is always a verb, and this is always the predicator. This is the simplest kind of clause. Any question about this? For example, in the clause, let's take another clause. Victor drives. Where is the predicate?
Drive.
Where is the predicator? It's
Victor.
the same. Now, Victor drove his car. Then we have a more complicated sentence, okay? So the predicator is the word, as in the video we have the explanation, the word in charge of the predicate. It's the most important word of the predicate. It's the head of the predicate. And the head of any predicate must be a verb. So the verb in the verb capsule, inside the verb capsule, when we have those complex verb tenses like present perfect, in which we have an auxiliary verb and a main verb, the predicator will always be the main verb. Okay. So in the case above, the predicator has nothing to take care of. Okay. Because there's no complement. They study. Now, if I say they study English, English is the thing that study takes care of. It's the head of the predicate study English, okay? So the predicate is made up of only one predicator in this case. But if we put here German, then we have German as the object of their studying. They study what? They study German. German is the object, in this case, the direct object. We are going to explore these characteristics later on. Okay, so in I am a student, as you saw, we have subject and predicate. Let's split it. Subject, for sure you are going to say I is the subject, and am a student is the predicate. Now, where is the predicator in I am a student?
It's a student.
The predicator.
Sorry, am.
Am is the predicator of the predicate am a student. Am a student is the predicate, and am is the predicator. It is in charge of the whole predicate am a student. Okay. But how about I student? Can I say I student is the object of the verb to be? Or it is a predicative complement? Justify it. It's either one or the other. A student is either a predicative complement or the object. How do you feel about that?
I think it's a predicative complement because a student doesn't really complement the verb rather than describing the subject.
It's like I equals a student. It's an equation. Yeah. It is referring back to the subject. It's a predicative complement related to the subject. Okay, so I have subject here, I am a student, the predicate, whose predicator is the verb am. I student is not external to I, it's intrinsic to I. That's what I am. So a student is a predicative complement, subject oriented in this case, okay? It's subject oriented because it refers back to the subject. Now let's go to the second example. In I bought a car. Where is the subject and the predicate? Where's the subject? I
Sorry, could you?
Here, in I bought a car, the subject is
I.
Now, bought a car is a predicate. Where is the predicator for this?
It's bought.
Bought, yeah. So let's mark it as predicator. Sorry. I bought a car. Bought a car is the predicate. And this is the predicator. This P here means predicator. Now, what is this predicate made of? It's made of a verb, bought, which happens to be the predicator. This is a verb. But how about the other elements? We have a and car. What kind of part of speech is a? We learned that a is an
determinator.
Yeah, an article, but articles belong to the bigger class of determiners. It's a determiner. And car, what word class is it? Remember our sentence to memorize the parts of speech? It's a noun. Yeah. If you don't remember the word classes, remember that hint I gave you. Like NASA discovered a very cold planet. Each initial will give you a word class. Anyway, I'm just exploring this to show you that they have grammatical functions. They are word classes, but they operate together. When you look at them operating together, forget about the determiner, forget about the noun. A car. What is the function of a car in relation to this whole sentence? A car is a determinative phrase or a noun phrase? What do you think? What's the most important word in a car? Is it the article a or the noun car?
The noun car.
Yeah, because when you substitute a car for a pronoun, you have I bought that, I bought this. You can change it for a pronoun. So only nouns or noun phrases can be interchangeable with pronouns. So this is a noun phrase. And this noun phrase plays the function of predicative complement or of an object. What kind of relationship is established by the verb to buy? Is it an action over an object, or is it an equation, like in I am student, I equals I student? Is a car referring back to something in the sentence, or suffering an action?
In this case, the action is done to the object.
That's it. That's it. So a car is the object. In this case, is this object direct or indirect?
Direct.
Yeah, it's a direct object. We have no preposition before the verb, okay? The action is directly taken over the car. It's different from, for example, I bought a car from John. And then we have a direct object and an indirect object, okay? But it's another topic, okay? So we have a syntactical analysis done here. We have the subject, the predicate, which is inside the external brackets, a car, which is the direct object in the internal brackets, okay? And the predicator of this predicate, please don't make confusion between predicate and predicator. Predicator is bought. It's the predicator for the predicate bought a car, okay? So it's the head of the predicate, okay? So just checking, okay, what we have just done. The predicator with the small p, okay? And a student is a noun phrase that works as a noun. Noun phrases will always work as nouns. Now, if you know that nouns in a clause will either be the subject or the object, noun phrases will either be the subject or the object, just like nouns. In I bought a car, we have the subject, the predicate, the predicator bought, and a car is a noun phrase because it works as the object. Now, what's the big difference between a student and a car if they are both noun phrases? What is the difference you can tell from a student and a car? We have two noun phrases here. Noun phrase over here. Oops, sorry. You have a noun phrase over here, and you have a noun phrase over here. Now, what's the big difference in terms of function?
Maybe we could say that in the first sentence we have a more subject-oriented predicate.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the second, if we, for example, if we had an indirect object, we would have a more object-oriented sentence.
That's it, okay? So a car is an object, a student is a description that refers back to the subject. So we can say that this clause is, this predicate, sorry, is subject-oriented because it is about the subject. And this predicate here is object-oriented because it tells me what I bought. Here, buy prepares the coming of the object, a car. Now here, I am will establish an equality relationship between I and the noun phrase a student. Okay, do you have any questions about this slide? Can we move on? Is it clear what a noun phrase is, what a predicator is, and also what a predicative complement is? If I ask you, what is a predicative complement? How does a predicative complement behave in a clause? If I say, I bought a car that is red. Let me find, sorry. Oops. Let me find the pen. I bought a car. Forget this bracket for a moment. That, oh my God. Forget the period. That is red. Now I have a bigger predicate. Okay. This is still the predicator, but a car that is red is what kind of phrase? Red is an adjective. So this is an adjective phrase. And this adjective phrase is referring back to the car. So it is a predicative complement, but not about the subject. It's about the object. So it's an object-oriented predicative complement. Do you understand? Although the horrible handwriting is red is a predicative, it's a predicative complement that refers back to something in the predicate. In the predicate, but a car that is red is what the car is. Okay? It's the object-oriented predicative complement. Now, a student is subject-oriented predicative complement because it refers back to the subject. In I am a student, or in I bought a car, a student describes I. So predicative complements describe something else in the sentence. This is the definition for predicative complements, okay? And when I say in the sentence, it could be either in the subject or in the predicate, as I have just shown you. In that is red, which is about the object. And I bought a car. A car is also a noun phrase, but it plays the role of the object of the sentence. Now, they are nice. What do you think is happening here? Is this the case of predicative complement or a case of object? The sentence, they are nice, is more similar to I am a student or to I bought a car? What do you think? Let's analyze it. Where's the subject?
Subject is they.
They. So by exclusion, are nice is the predicate. Now, where is the predicator for are nice?
Are is the predicator.
Yeah, the predicator is always the verb. In this case, we have only one. The predicator is always the main verb. In this case, we have only one. It's the predicator. Now, what is the function of nice? Nice is an adjective. Here, I can say nice. Can I say nice is an adjective phrase? An adjective on its own can also be treated as an adjective phrase. Okay, now what is the function of nice? What is nice referring back to? Or can I say nice is the object of the verb
not
to be?
exactly. Nope.
No, because being, what is the object of being? Like, I am happy. What is the object? It's a relationship, it's a state of being. Like nice is a state of being. Now, nice. Who is nice? They. Are you ready to make a decision? Is this an object or a predicative complement?
It's a predicative complement.
Yes. Look at what predicative complements are. They describe something else in the sentence. In this case, nice describes they, which happens to describe the subject. So it's a subject-oriented predicative complement. So nice is an adjective phrase which describes they, so it's a predicative complement. That's it. Do you have any question about this? Do you all agree that nice is a predicative complement? In this sentence, they are nice?
Yes, I don't have any questions.
Okay. So, again, let me just erase the ink here. So it's a subjective predicative complement or a subject-oriented predicative complement because it refers back to the subject. Now, when I gave him a book, where's the subject? You will always look for the verb and split it. I gave him a book. The subject is I. Let's analyze the other parts of this sentence. Gave him a book. Where's the predicator?
So is the verb, so gave.
Okay, gave is the predicator. Now we have him a book. Can you split this into this predicate into smaller phrases? Do you see phrases inside this? In purple here, a book. What kind of a phrase is this? It's a something phrase.
It's a predictive complement.
Let's not try to find the complements now. Just tell me what kind of a phrase is this?
A noun phrase.
It's a noun phrase because book is the head of this. Now, noun phrases, we have seen that noun phrases can behave either as the subject or the object of sentences. Now, what is the case here? Is a book a subject or the object?
It's working as the direct object.
The object. A book is the direct object. Now, we still have him. We all know that him belongs to the word class of
pronouns.
Yeah, nouns. We decided that to remember in our approach, we put nouns and pronouns together. So it's if it's a noun or a pronoun, we have two types of pronouns. This is a pronoun. But we have two types of pronoun. We have subjective pronouns and objective pronouns. You see the similarities? Do you see the similarities between pronouns and noun phrases? They both behave either as the subject or the object. They are either subjective or objective pronouns. In this case, him, how do we call him in traditional grammar? Subjective pronoun or objective pronoun?
Object pronoun.
Objective pronoun. Because it functions as the object. So let's now erase this analysis and bring only what is interesting for us here, the word object. So him is an object. Now, what kind of an object is him? Oops, let's just use O. Is it a direct object or an indirect object? What is our definition of direct object? The direct object is called direct object because it establishes a direct relationship with the verb. A book is what was given. Now, the indirect object is normally the direction of the action. I gave a book to him. I gave him a book. Him is the indirect object. Do you agree with this analysis? Because him is the direction of the giving. What did you give him? A book. Who did you give a book to? Who did you give the book to? I gave a book to him. So we are normally used to identify indirect objects with the presence of prepositions. But in this case, the preposition is not here clearly marked. We have to manipulate it with questions, either with questions or with paraphrases, okay? We have to paraphrase the period to identify it. But him is the direction of my giving. Okay? Any questions so far?
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Right. So here with a more organized diagram, the predicator, a book is the object, and him is the direction where the given goes. So the book is the thing that gets given, is the direct object, and him is the direction. So it's the indirect object. Okay. In we drove her crazy. First of all, what we are doing here is a kind of practice. Okay. In we drove her crazy, I want you to find the subject. Where's the subject?
So the subject is we.
The subject. Good. Now, drove her crazy is all the rest of the sentence. Now, where's the predicator?
Drove.
We have only one verb, which is the predicator. Now, what is crazy in terms of word class and what is her? Well, we learned in the last example that her is a pronoun, which is in the bigger group of nouns. It's a pronoun. Oops, sorry. It's a pronoun which belongs to the bigger groups, the bigger group of nouns, and nouns can be either subjective or objective. In this case, her. Is it a subjective pronoun or an objective pronoun? What do you think?
I'm gonna say object. It's an object pronoun.
Yeah. So I can say that her is the object. I just have to decide if it's the direct or the indirect one. But let's leave the O here. How about crazy? What kind of a word? What word class is crazy? Crazy is?
Adjective.
An adjective. So what we have here is an adjective phrase. Now, can I say crazy is an object? Or is it describing something else?
Guess it's describing the object.
And crazy is describing we or her?
Her.
So she's crazy. She was driven crazy. Okay, so it's an adjective that refers back to her. Now,
Her.
anything that refers back is a predicative complement. Remember that? A predicative complement refers back. In this case, is it referring back to the subject or back to the object? It's an object-oriented predicative complement because it's going back to her to describe the state of being to which we drove her crazy. Okay, so crazy is a predicative complement. Okay, for now it's enough saying it's a predicative complement. It's also an adjective phrase. Okay, now I will erase this and show you the whole analysis. Let me just clear this. Okay, so we drove her crazy. Drove her crazy is the predicate whose subject is we. The predicator is drove. What is her? We have decided that it's the direction of the action. Is it?
Not in this case, I don't think so.
She is our
object.
We did something to her. So is it direct or indirect object?
Direct.
She's the direct object. Okay. Now, just as a hint, I have just mentioned this, but keep in mind how we call these pronouns. They are the objective pronouns, but objective pronouns can be either direct or indirect. In this case, okay, we caused her to change her mood. So her is the direct object. Differently from I gave him a book, in which him is the direction of my giving of the book. In the second example, I caused her to get crazy. I caused her to change the mood. So this her entity is directly related to my action. Okay, it's the direct object. So note that the subject is doing something to her. Okay, drove her. So this is the direct object, and crazy is the predicative complement. Okay. In this case, an object-oriented predicative complement, or if you prefer, an objective predicative complement. Do you have any question about this analysis? Do you think it's easy to analyze clausal sentences like these? At least, does it look like easy? Does it look like it's easy?
It does, but I'm quite insecure when it comes to that.
We all get insecure at first, but it's not difficult. Now, when you come across more complex sentences, the strategy is turn them into into simpler ones. I mean, when you come across non-canonic clauses, turn them into canonical and analyze them separated. Okay, so we just learned in this class today 5 canonical structures of English clauses. Okay, from the most basic one, which is subject and predicate over here, as in I run. And if you remember the video, we developed the degree, we increased the degree of complexity, okay, to sentences with a subject, a predicate, and a predicative complement, as in I am a runner, or subject, predicate, direct object, or subject, predicate, and indirect object, as in I teach English, or I teach him, okay? The first example with direct object and the second example with indirect object. We also learned a structure with subject, predicate. Sorry, when I said predicate, I beg your pardon, predicator. Subject, predicator, indirect object, and direct object, like I teach you syntax, or I teach him syntax, in which him is the direction of my teaching, and syntax is what I teach. So it's another pattern. And subject, predicator, indirect object, and predicative complement. I made them angry. I made my students confused. Okay. I is the subject, made is the predicator, my students or them is the indirect object. Sorry, the direct object. I'm sorry. I think this is a typing problem. Let me correct it. Sorry about this. Because it would be repetitive. I have indirect object over here. I'm sorry. It's a copy-paste thing. So subject, predicator, direct object, because I did something to you. Okay, you are the in a direct relationship with my action, and predicative complement, angry, which refers back to them. I made my students confused. I making confused is what I did, and my students are in a direct relationship with me in order to get confused. And confused is a predicative complement that will describe the students. Okay. So basically, we have 5 canonical structures. So when you see in those contests, especially in the university contest for teachers, when you want to become a university professor, there is always a topic like this for you to teach in or to write your exam. Talk about the 5 canonical patterns of sentences, or the 5 sentence patterns. Eles às vezes dão nomes diferentes, mas a coisa é a mesma. The 5 patterns in English, or the 5 canonical structures, or whatever like this. The topic is exactly describing these 5 ways, these 5 basic ways which sentences are built. Okay, sentences will always structure, canonical structures, canonical clausal sentences will always be like these. They will be either one of these 5 basic structures. These are the 5 basic structures of English declarative clausal sentences. So we have the intransitive ones, okay, and the transitive ones. Why do I call intransitive or transitive? The intransitive ones are about the subject, whereas the transitive clauses, there is a transition to the world outside. There's an object, isn't there? Direct or indirect. Sometimes direct and indirect. Okay, that's why we call transitive. States of being are not transitive. I do not have to transit outside myself. Well, unless if I have identity problems, identity issues, but it belongs to myself. I run. I am a teacher. I feel like this or like that. Intransitive. Now, transitive. There's a relationship with an object. I teach my students about syntax. Okay, so I have a relationship with the students. I voted this or that candidate. So there is a relationship established with me and the candidate. Any questions about this? Do you clearly see this dichotomy between intransitive and transitive?
Yes.
Okay. And in the video, if you watch it again, I hope you see these 5 structures. The guy that teaches in the video, he doesn't even tell us his name. It would be really nice at least to give him some credit, but he develops from the most basic type of canonical structure to the most complex. If you watch the video again with the eyes keeping these structures in mind, you will see that he will develop progressively into this direction. Okay. Well, so for now, I think That's enough. Let me just go back here and print. Take my print. I hope you understood the content. Okay, I hope you liked the class. If you have no questions, we can finish for today, and I'll be back on Thursday. And maybe with some exercises. I strongly recommend watching this class again, especially the video part. Okay?
Yeah. Cool.
So have a
Okay.
nice morning. Okay, a nice end of morning. And if you have another class, have a nice class. See you on Thursday.
All right. See ya.
See you.
See ya.
Bye bye.